Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's guest is CFL alumnus, as well as owner of Streats Kitchens, Michael Klassen. Michael, thanks for being on today's episode, man. I'm really excited to talk about football and food with you. Two things that can never, ever, you can go wrong with having at the exact same time.
Yeah, two of the most important three F's of our lives, food, football, and I'm not going to say the third one, but you can guess what it might be.
You've been super busy recently with the success that the business has been having, wearing multiple hats, helping the organization and the restaurant to grow across Canada. What has been the biggest lesson you've learned over the last year being involved in the restaurant industry, and particularly during the time of COVID, when it makes things a little more difficult to get business off the ground?
Probably just, as in sports, it's the ability to adapt and evolve at a moment's notice. It's, things come up, and obviously COVID threw a huge fork in everyone's plans, especially in the restaurant business, being shut down, being reopened, shut down with restrictions, all those things. So there's a lot of evolving and a lot of things that we had to do and come up with essentially on the fly that we've never had to worry about before. So I think that's one thing, football and being an active member in sports is like sometimes things aren't going to go your way, but it's how you handle them. Not to be cliche, but you get knocked down. How many times you get back up, right? So it's just, sticking out through the tough times and hoping for better times. And luckily we made it through kind of, unscathed. And now we're starting to see the successes in doing so.
The CFL is probably the most prominent sports league, at least that we can think of here in North America, that took the biggest hit during COVID, with them not having had any season at all. And there was a few other leagues that weren't able to, but of the major four, everyone went: NHL, MLB, NBA, NFL. But the CFL wasn't able to muster up even just a few games for people to play compared to 2019. And then what ended up happening was lots of people experienced the existential crisis that happens at the end of a football player's career, where they say, what comes first, playing football or my family or other personal priorities? And you were a person that came to that crossroads with having played for the Alouettes and RedBlacks previously. And then when the season was canceled, you had to make a decision as to what you were going to do to continue your life. So how did you handle the situation of knowing that there was not going to be professional football in 2020? And what factor, I guess, was it for you that helped you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to go full blast on Streets, and I can't really afford to worry about football anymore?
I agree with you that a lot of players were in that situation. Unfortunately, I was lucky enough, and I actually went out on my own terms and I retired at the end of the 2019 season. So I'd actually made that decision about 5 months prior to COVID, which was probably the only time I ever timed something correctly in my entire life. So I was lucky in that aspect because I kind of knew how involved I was going to get. And I, in fact, actually started working before the season even ended, because I knew, I kind of went to Marcel Desjardins and our coach at the time, Rick Campbell, and kind of told him about, with 3 weeks left in the season, that, hey, I think I'm done after this year. I was kind of hurt at the time anyways. And I just knew that my body had enough. So it's time for me to hang him up. I went to coach, the general manager. I said, hey, hanging it up. Is there any way I could dress for one more warm up or whatever? So our last game there, I think it was November 5th, 2019. They let me, the league gave me permission to go out there on the field one last time, do the warm up, did a little individual, got to wear the jersey, the pads one last time. And it was awesome. And then, unbeknownst to anybody, I guess there wasn't a season in 2020. And there was a lot of guys kind of in my situation, like year 6, 7, 8, probably married, maybe a couple kids or whatever. And then the season never happened. And those are the guys that I really feel for, because, they had to make the tough decision that they had wanted to play more football, but that opportunity wasn't there. They had to go find a job. They couldn't just continue training for a whole nother year with no income. Like, even myself, the way the CFL works is you get paid during the season. So you get paid your whole salary, whether it be a good salary or not, kind of in 16 to 18 weeks time. So what most guys don't realize is that, hey, you have to survive for 6 months after the season until the next season starts. But with COVID in the way, now you're talking 18 months. So I can imagine a lot of guys were in some tough financial positions and had to make that decision the hard way. So yeah, I feel for a lot of guys, and the environment and the rosters in the CFL are nothing compared to what they were in 2019, meaning the same guys, right? Like it's a totally new, they're totally new rosters out there. So
it's amazing that you were able to come out unscathed well before probably one of the most lopsided, craziest non-seasons that ever happened. And that's the thing that is an unfortunate reality of football, is even regardless of COVID, it can just be tough to play for like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, especially at your position, defensive line. It's very physically demanding, and it's not like you've only ever been playing football during the time that you're in the CFL. You're playing football when you're in university. You're playing football when you're in high school. You're playing football when you're a kid. And if you're playing the same position or always taking a physical beating, then it's eventually going to wear on you. And your health is going to be the most important priority in your life as you get older. And if you don't have that in good shape, especially during a CFL career, it can be definitely very difficult to feel the motivation to go forward.
exactly. And I mean, I wouldn't say I'm totally unscathed, right? I'm feeling it, carrying around a lot of extra pounds and playing 7 years at a very physical position. But, ultimately, that was my life for 7 years, but now I'm on to the next chapter of my life. I got a kid on the way, starting to run a successful business and being involved in other things. So it's another exciting chapter of my life that started, and I'm pretty happy to have timed the retirement when I did.
What was your favorite memory from your time playing in the CFL? What I'll ask you first before we go into your stuff with the Dinos.
Like favorite memory playing or favorite memory being part of the CFL, because those are two completely different things.
I'd love to know both. I think that would be definitely very fascinating.
I think one of my favorite memories of the CFL would probably be starting in the 2018 Grey Cup against Calgary, who I'd just played for the year prior. So it meant a lot for me to go out there against my ex-teammates, as well as just being able to start in a Grey Cup. The field conditions were probably the worst of any Grey Cup played ever. I don't know if you remember that game, but like the field had frozen that afternoon, and it was like playing on a hockey rink. It was absolutely nuts. But just being able to be a part of that, and I had a huge support family and that in the stands, so they all got to come watch, because being from Calgary, Edmonton's only a 3-hour drive, so I had quite the fan base there. I mean, there was probably so many other games where, it was a blowout or I had a great performance. But just being part of something that big, in Canadian history, I think was probably the highlight of my playing career. And then as far as, I don't know, memories outside of football, it's just, I mean, every day in the locker room is a memory. And, a lot of wins in Ottawa where everyone would pile back in the locker room and there'd just be a full-on dance party that break out. And me being the idiot I am would be the only white guy in the middle of the mix with my shirt off, just giving her. So that was fun. And, there was a lot of opportunities and events that we were able to attend to or got the opportunity to attend. And I think it all just adds into the bank. I can't really think of one specific moment, but just being part of it for that long was awesome.
Who's the best dancer in the locker room then?
Me, definitely. A lot of times it was just in a towel, which my teammates didn't appreciate that much, but you got to give your boy some credit that like he's probably the best dancer.
No doubt. And that Ottawa RedBlacks team 2018 was a lot of fun. It unfortunately fell apart the next year in terms of the wins and loss column, but there's nothing to take away from how well the team did in 2018. And obviously coming up against Calgary twice within 3 years is going to be really difficult to beat them a second time. The 2016 one almost cost a heart attack for every Ottawa fan out there. And but you were on Calgary before too. So being on the flip side of that, you would know players from both sides, and you would know what that feeling is like being in that difficult scenario of the game where it's close or it looks like it's out of reach. But at the end of the day, losing sucks, but there's nothing that takes away, like you said, from those day-to-day memories, being in the locker room, being able to get to know the guys, and then those relationships and how they develop way after football, because they're going to last a lot longer than any person's CFL playing career.
Exactly. And I mean, everyone always asks me, you know, do I miss football? And I'm like, I don't know if I miss football, but I do miss being around the guys, the camaraderie in the locker room, you know, the parties, the opportunity to see Canada when most Canadians haven't even seen as much Canada as I have, because I mean, we play in every major city. I mean, we even got to play a game out in Moncton when I played for Montreal, and Touchdown Atlantic, they called it. So the only reason I've seen as much of Canada as I have is because of football. No other reason.
What's your favorite place? Where's your favorite place to play football on the road? So, because I know you've played you were with the Alouettes, you were with the Stampeders, as well as the RedBlacks. So what place did you really enjoy to play away from home during your CFL career?
When I played for Montreal, it was probably Ottawa, and definitely Calgary was always the best place to play, because we'd only playing out on an Eastern team. You'd only get to play in Calgary once. So it was that one opportunity where I got to play in front of all my friends and families. My parents would throw this huge tailgate, like cater like 200 people. Like, it was absolutely crazy. Ottawa was always one of my favorite places to go, because it was just a short bus ride, and I think Ottawa's a beautiful city. So it was awesome when I got to spend 2 years there myself. And then, I mean, Montreal, I lived in Montreal, so I kind of got used to it, but I know that's a lot of guys' favorite road trips, and Vancouver's nice as well, but the game itself sucks because they don't get any fans out there. It's cool playing in this nice big indoor stadium, but it's always like hot and humid and they don't have any fans. But Vancouver, going out in Vancouver the day before and then the night after the game is always a blast.
Vancouver definitely has to be one of the best cities, or one of the best major cities in all of Canada. I would argue it's my favorite. I mean, being from Winnipeg, there's definitely a lot of other places that you can enjoy more than what we have here in the prairies. Not to say that Winnipeg is not a good city at all, but if you're a CFL player, I would definitely enjoy, the time spent in Vancouver after and before the game, even though you are right. I have watched a few games at BC Place. I wish the fans had more intrinsic passion, no matter how good the team was, but it's the unfortunate reality of playing in a big market where the Canucks reign supreme. But you said it perfectly. Being able to see so much of Canada and more of the country than most people have, all because of football, is just something that you really can't look back on and be upset about. Yeah,
exactly. Somebody else is paying you for these experiences, right? So it's cool. Are you sad that I didn't say Winnipeg was one of my favorites to play in?
I feel like it would fit more in the category of dreaded places to play or toughest places to play in terms of the weather or the wind, because the prairies love football more than any other part of Canada, but at the same time, definitely not the most favorable conditions, especially for people who do come from the East Coast, or, I mean, someone like yourself being from Calgary, you know what it's like to play in the prairies more than maybe some of your teammates who are from Eastern Canada, or some of your teammates who are from the Southern US who aren't used to minus 20 or 30 kilometers an hour of wind on a regular basis in November and in October.
Yeah, I think I was part of 3 game delays, weather delays, and they were all in Winnipeg, but mainly in the summer due to lightning. I don't think they ever canceled or delayed a game because it was too cold, because us Canadians, I played in some cold ass games.
Especially being from Calgary, the way that the 2017 Grey Cup actually is what I think of when you think about Canadian football and the inclement weather and how random it can be. That game was in Ottawa, and whatever it was, I think half an hour or something before kickoff is all good. Next thing you know, boom, Winter Wonderland. And that was another game that had tons of crazy action. And also it was tied in with the footing, the snow that had to be cleared. And there's a few Grey Cups I can think of off the top of my head that have that classic winter Christmas look where the whole field is white and all you can see is maybe the lines once they get plowed. those games, I'm sure, are a lot of fun to play in as a defensive lineman.
Yeah, they are, because I mean, everything just gets thrown right out the window, and it's just like, man, you're just out in the park playing ball with your boys at that point, because you're slipping and sliding all over the place and all that good stuff. But I was part of that Calgary Grey Cup versus Toronto as well, which was fun. But yeah, it's something different, and I can't wait to watch the Grey Cup this year, because it's going to be played December 12th or something crazy like that. Mind you, November 30th, December 12th, it's just as likely to be cold as hell, but it's Hamilton to boot. So you're going to have that humidity, and it's just going to be stupid cold.
Yeah, it's going to be just insane. If it was in Winnipeg or if it was in Saskatchewan because of the year that they missed, that I don't know if they would have even allowed it to have been played in Regina if it was going to be in December 12th, to be honest.
Yeah. They're like, I don't know why they just didn't plan at BC, man, but they can't get any fans out, and it wasn't their turn, so who knows?
Yeah, exactly. I would like to ask you about your experience with the Calgary Dinos, though. They are one of the best teams in the country all the time. In the Canada West, they reign supreme for many, many years, since the mid to late 2000s, or the Blake Neal era, as Canada West football fans would know. You played there for 4 years and had the opportunity to be a part of some outstanding football teams. What was the best thing that you enjoyed about being a football player at the University of Calgary? Right off the top of your head, first thing that jumps to mind.
I'd say just be held accountable to like training programs and that. I think that's what I fell in love with right away my first couple of years, because I wasn't playing. I came in very undersized. I'm 6'5", but I think I came in my first year at like 195 pounds. Like most of our receivers are bigger than me. But just right away, like having that structured environment, like, hey, you have to be here, there, and here at certain times, with workouts, 6 a.m. every morning. As much as guys complain about 6 a.m. workouts, like I deep down kind of loved them. Like it put you in this weird schedule where you're going to bed at 9 o'clock, you're eating a ton of calories. And I had a lot of success in the weight room, which I like then would give credit to where I ended up in my football career in that training program. But Dinos, I mean, yeah, I fell in love with the locker room, and just, all the guys, everyone comes from different backgrounds. It was kind of the first time in my life where I was surrounded by not so many like-minded people, right? Because up until that point, you're kind of the neighborhood school. You have your school friends that you grew up for 6 years, and all of a sudden you just get put in this melting pot of this locker room, and you got guys from all over the province, all over the city, all these guys, and it was amazing. And I befriended all of them, and we had a blast. And I didn't care that I didn't play for 2 years, because you're still made part of it, and you grow up together. And some of my best friends today are probably all my Dinos teammates.
It's truly an incredible experience like no other, being able to play university football, and especially in your hometown where you grew up. Is like you just said, you grow up knowing all your high school friends, and you go to university and you're playing with people who are from all different walks of life, different parts of the province, and sometimes different parts of the country. Coaches come from all over. They have different levels of experience, and they all have different personalities. Now, as a defensive lineman, definitely one of the toughest nitty-gritty groups on an entire football team. What would you say is your favorite cliche that exists about the D-line group? One that you really embrace?
If the bar ain't bending, you just pretended. I don't know. It was just, it was meathead central out there. Like, Blake Neal was our position coach 1 year. And I swear all we did was hit the sled for 40 minutes a day. And it's just like, all you had to do to play on his D-line was be the biggest, strongest meathead out there. Because we played a 30 front. So you had me playing strong end at 275. You had Josh Simons at 290 in the middle, and he was squatting 600 pounds. And you had Lyndon Gadosh, who went down the NFL first overall CFL pick, playing the weekend. And between the three of us, like, we averaged like 290 pounds. We had 900 pounds of D-line, and there was only three of us. So it's just like, but nothing is better than playing against a lineman that were smaller than you. And that's what we had on the Dinos D-line. So it was quite the experience. And you know, one-on-ones were always fun and you took those to heart. It was like mono y mono, man to man, like who's coming out the gauntlet, you know, like I'm going to dominate you. You think you're dominating me. And I still have some clips saved on my phone of me just dummying some Dinos O-linemen. So.
And not just O-linemen, if you were doing that to guys on your team, I couldn't imagine what you guys did to the University of Alberta Golden Bears during that time, because that must have been just you guys, you and Lyndon and Josh were probably licking your chops the second that you got to play against U of A in that time, if you're throwing around Dinos linemen.
Oh yeah, I don't think Lyndon even played against U of A because it wasn't worth it. We beat U of A 50-1 one year, and Coach Nill brought us all in the next day to make us run striders because he thought we played so terribly.
Wow, that's
so here we are getting punished for beating a team by 50 points. Mind you, we did take quite a few penalties, but
oh, there you go. Right, that's the thing that coaches always try to do, the Coach Carter angle. Oh, you won by this or whatever, but guess what? You weren't disciplined, or you didn't do it in the way that I want. So I'm still going to punish you, even if you put a 50 burger on them.
Exactly.
Who was your favorite team to play against then, the Canada West? Because obviously the Dinos dominated so much, but was there a strong rivalry you guys had with another team that really made for some interesting football during your time?
I'd say we always had a pretty strong rivalry with Regina and Saskatoon, or Regina and the Huskies, whatever, the Rams and the Huskies. Just because they're kind of a little better caliber, because for the most part, I mean, all 4 years we kind of cruised through and won the, I wouldn't say we cruised through, like we still had to fight for it a bit, but we won our conference all 4 years I was there, right? UBC was okay. They had some talent, but ultimately, I mean, U of A was, you know, I think they got a little better since I left, but yeah, that was a tune-up game, you know? So yeah, I'd say probably, I'd probably say the Huskies, we probably had the biggest rivalry with, and it was always fun. Like they had great coaching. They had a great atmosphere and alumni around their program, kind of like the Dinos did. So I'd say it was probably most comparable. And it seemed we were always kind of playing them in the Can West final, or at least the semifinal.
That era you played, the 4 years you played, would have been 2010 to 2013?
09 through 12. So we went to 2 Vanier Cups and lost both of them, and then went to 2 national semifinals and lost 2 of them. So I constantly call myself the biggest loser because I've lost 2 Vanier Cups, 2 national semifinals, 2 CFL semifinals, and 2 CFL Grey Cups. So I've missed out on the ring 4 times.
Oh man, and it's the thing that makes it the most difficult is that people don't understand sometimes from the outside that no matter how few teams there are, no matter how many times you've beat the same team, football games are super hard to win. Period. End of story. Especially in Canadian football, especially in the Canada West, especially in the CFL. Really, really hard to beat the same team twice, and just really hard to win games in general. There's so much that goes into it.
Well, look at what already happened this first couple of weeks in the CFL, man. Your favorites are dropping off, and some of the low-key guys are coming up, man. It's anyone's shot. And that was the same thing in 17 when I was on Calgary and we played Toronto. You play that game 100 times, Calgary wins 98 of those times. But Toronto, you know, big play at the end there, and then like fumble recovery, taken back, and then a pick. And it's just like all of a sudden game over. Calgary's on the sideline crying. You know I was crying.
It's just, that's the way the football works. And it's so tough sometimes, I'm sure, especially being in that position. I know with having seen some legendary players in the CFL and even in the Canada West, being from Winnipeg, the first exposure I had to really following Canada West football was 13, 14. Those Bisons teams were great. And the 14 was the year they beat Calgary in the Hardy Cup. And that was like an extreme shock. No one in Calgary expected that to happen. And in 13, they lost to Calgary in the Hardy Cup, but they beat Saskatchewan, and that was like a huge upset. And I remember thinking, like, why is this such a big deal? Like, aren't they better than this team, or couldn't they beat this team more often? But coaches have told me, and from having seen what goes on behind the scenes, Now it gives you a lot more perspective as to, okay, well, you're right. You guys would beaten Toronto 99 times probably out of 100, but all it takes is bang, bang, a few plays, and then that's it. It all ends, and it doesn't matter what happened before. It just matters what happens during the game.
Exactly. And I mean, football is such a rough sport. You can't play series best out of 7 like you do in hockey and baseball and that, right? Like even in hockey, you'll have an NHL team that comes out, wins 3 games back to back to back, by far the dominant team. But that not so dominant team is probably still going to win one of them or 2 of them out of the series, right? So it's just like same thing. When you just give them one game to prove themselves, you know, the underdog might come out on top.
So now, with having been involved with the restaurant industry, you had a very successful football career in terms of being able to play on some excellent teams at a high level for a longer time than some people may ever be afforded the chance to have. What were some of the things that made you know, because you said that you retired before COVID even made the CFL season be canceled. So what were some of the things that you knew before retiring that helped you to transition into your post-football career?
Like, what do you mean? Like as far as work ethic and stuff, or like, what are things that I knew? I don't quite understand the question.
Let me clarify. So some people don't know what they're going to do after the football career is done. They horse blinders on, they're ready to fire and keep going at football as long as they can until when it stops or when I can't go anymore or someone takes it from me, then that's when I'll figure it out. But you said that you had kind of already known or had seen that your time was going to end. So what were some things that helped you to transition into your post-football playing career with the work you did in the restaurant industry? Was it from the influence from your dad, or was it things that you had kind of taken your own initiative on? What things helped you to transition and to steer your focus away from football when the time came necessary?
I mean, yeah, sorry. I should have known what you were talking about.
No worries.
I guess I've kind of known my whole life. I grew up in the family business, being a part, seeing what my dad had done his whole life, which, you know, he started Joey's Seafood Restaurants back in his 20s, back in 1982 or 1985. You know, had a bit of success with that and grew that brand up very strong into the early 2000s. And then, you know, didn't do much, or, you know, he got involved in quite a few other projects. So the attention and everything wasn't quite all there, and the brand was kind of on the decline just a little bit or whatever. So then he'd come up with a new brand called Joey's Urban. And this was going to be the response. Okay, we need to get the younger kids in, all these good things, you know, kind of, we need to evolve. And he was smart enough to make that decision. Unfortunately, Joey's Urban just never really took off how it needed to be or whatever. So one of my off seasons, I think it was 16, I'm kind of doing some stuff around the office. I was always kind of helping out with the family business in my off seasons. And I was actually part of the meeting. We sat my dad down. Hey, Dad, Joe is his name, Joey. We need to change the name. We need to change the name of Joey's Urban. So we changed the name to what is called now Streats. So this is back in 17, I believe. And, you know, just started slowly updating things, whether it be the way the menus look, what the menu offerings are, all those good things. We opened a couple stores. I was actually managing one of our streets, our first street store, in my off season after I played in Calgary. So that would have been 18. So I'd kind of work in the, you know, in the restaurants and that. So here I am going back to football. I kind of told my dad multiple times that I was thinking about retiring. He's kind of like kicking me like, hey, when are you going to be done? Like, we need some help over here, you know, kind of thing. Which was always nice to know that he wanted me to come on board, despite like having as much experience as somebody else would who had been working in that industry their whole life, right? Because I always had to go play football for 6 months of the year. So finally, you know, my body's had enough. My hips screwed up. My back screwed up. We suck in 2019. This one I played for Ottawa. And after I told him that I was going to retire, he flew out to watch my last game, but he flew out a week early, and we're like starting to cook up recipes in my little hotel apartment and stuff. He's like, we should run this feature. Okay, let's think of a recipe. We're going to the grocery store. Like, we're cooking up queso and stuff that we might want to try at Streets. So then it was kind of like, that was my destiny. Okay, now I'm getting hired on as regional manager at Streets. Okay, great. Like, let's see what we can do. Started my training literally within 2 weeks of being home. So I didn't even get a time off. Like, if this all played out perfectly, I think I would have taken like a half a year off. But my dad's, kind of one of those nose to the grindstone kind of guys, right? Like, he's like, no, what are you doing? You got to get him to work. Okay. So, and I was getting married that year. So, it was a busy time. Come home from the season, November, start work right away, get married December 31st, New Year's Eve. And then, I don't know, we hit the ground running, and then I found this location downtown Calgary, and I'm like, hey, Dad, this looks like a good location. We've never really opened one in an A-class location. A-class being like high visibility, huge population surrounding it, that type of stuff, which is exactly what the 11th Ave store does. So I kind of took it upon myself. I raised some funds, put a business plan together. We found this old restaurant. I drew up all the floor plans and everything, how we wanted to renovate it, because it wasn't going to be like a new restaurant. The hoods, the bathrooms were already there. Okay, let's see how we can carve this thing out and make it our own. And it was that store that we completely changed the look of Streets, like completely. Like, if you still see some of our older Street stores, they do not look like that. And I kind of sat in the parking lot with my dad after we had done a walkthrough or something. So this was probably February 2020, March 2020. And I stood outside in the parking lot with my dad and said, this one's going to be the game changer. It's going to be busy. People are going to take notice of our brand now, all these sorts of things. We took over the restaurant March 23rd, 2020. And I think COVID and the closures happened the next day. Literally the whole world shut down. So then I was like, okay, now we have some time to renovate. And we opened April 10th, probably the worst time ever. And as much as, we were kind of discouraged and all that stuff, like, downtown was dead. There wasn't a car on 11th Ave, which is usually this busy road. But, we fought, and I think that was a huge push to do as much marketing as it did last year. Was just like, we need to do something. We need to try to get people down to the store and to our other stores. And it wasn't about 2 or 3 weeks after COVID closures happened that people were like, okay, like, I still need to eat. And our sales just started skyrocketing. Maybe a month or two after, but yeah. And now since then, like, the brand has done very well. Mind you, my store downtown, the 11th Ave store, it suffered for quite some time because the population just wasn't going downtown to work anymore. Everyone was doing the work from home thing, right? But since we've opened that one, we kind of changed the game on how we open these things. We look for built out restaurants, then we can do quicker renovations instead of spending, we're opening restaurants for half the prices as what our competitors do and what we used to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the biggest aspect of the game that I kind of brought to the company, as well as, the look, and continually updating, new features and new menu items, and, working with people with dietary restrictions. We've evolved the brand more in the last year than I think we have in the last 5 or 10 years prior, which is cool being a part of that. And we have a good team built around us now. Before, it's just me and my colleague kind of thing doing everything. And now people see that store and they want one. So we've now since opened 5 more since we opened that one in less than a year. And we got about 5 more coming up in the next 4 or 5 months here. So you heard it here first. Streets will be 100 stores in less than 10 years.
I have no doubt in my mind that that'll be able to be achieved, because for the listener out there, my experience at Streets was absolutely outstanding. I'm not a paid actor. I literally didn't even know you or have ever interacted with you before this recording today on August 17th. And when I went there, it was amazing. The food was great, price point, everything, the look, the location. So the fact you're able to do that in Calgary, and that you're mentioning you have one in Winnipeg and you're opening them up in other provinces. This thing could be very huge. Was it you who took the initiative to start looking to branch the company to more provinces outside of Alberta, or how did that transition take place with opening stores in Winnipeg? And like you mentioned, some are looking to expand into Ontario.
Well, because we had that Joey's Only connection, we're just kind of known all over, and it kind of depends on where somebody wants a store, right? We do advertising for people that own franchises as well as for customers to come and eat our food. We sell food, but we also sell restaurants too, right? That's the franchise game. So depends on where they're located and where they want to be. And then it's finding them a location that's suitable for both parties. You know, we like it, they like it, the cost is right, all those sorts of things. But a few of our partners have actually are older partners or have been involved with us on the Joey side of things as well. But now that the brand's kind of on the up and up, we're getting just totally cold calls, people wanting them, which is the best thing you can hear, that, you know, we've created something cool enough that people want their own.
For sure. I even was looking at the way that you guys brand and market yourselves on social media. And the one thing that really hooked me in, or that made me remember that you had been helping grow this business, especially during COVID and after you retired from the CFL, was a reel of you interviewing people on the street, literally, and saying, "Oh, how does this taste? Oh, you know that's vegan, right?" And people wouldn't be able to tell. And they were just so flabbergasted. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, personally, I love those types of street interviews in any setting, whether it's sports, food, whatever. And just seeing the way that you connect with the customer outside of, well, just come to my store. Like, let me go and meet you there, meet you where you are. I think that's such a really important thing to do as a business that's trying to grow, because then you know that you're developing a better relationship with people that you want to come to your store.
Well, it's having faith in your product, right? Like, we know our food's good. We know if you come once, you'll come back. So it's getting our food in as many mouths as possible. And we take different direction and techniques to how we're marketing. And I'm not scared to say no to a dumb idea. If I have to make a fool of myself to help something go viral or get seen by as many eyes, I'll probably do it. So we have a lot of fun with our marketing, and you can tell by the following we've built over the last year and a bit since I took over the marketing. But yeah, ultimately we have fun doing it, and there's not a lot of videos. If you went through all our videos, there's very few that I'm actually standing there selling you something. I'm more selling an experience, selling a vibe, and really selling a story, a funny story that people can hopefully just enjoy watching. So we stay top of mind for anytime they need to go eat.
Exactly. That's the best way to do it, and not sound like a used car salesman or anything, especially when it comes to experience like eating street food. It's so commonplace across the entire world. And it's more about honestly, like, eating street food is more about the experience than it is like, oh, well, if I sit here and critique it like it's a Michelin star restaurant, like, man, you're eating food in the street, like you're with your friends or you're with people you like, or you're meeting friends, whatever it is, like that's what the experience is about. And then if you can just elevate that with food that is actually really good, then it just makes everything way better.
Yeah, loud music, good food, and cheap beer, man. That'll get you out.
So I must ask you, with now having been involved with Streats for quite some time and then jumping into it after your football career is done, where do you want to see the business go from here? And what are maybe some of the professional goals you have with the business that you'd like to accomplish in the next, like, let's say, I don't know, anywhere between 5 and like 20 years, like depends on how far down the road you think.
Well, we're currently running 3 brands. So Streats is kind of my baby and the one I'm most involved with, but we still have the Joey store. And we actually took COVID last year, and me and my colleague, and my dad, obviously Joe, we rebranded the Joey stores. So now we're opening new Joey's Fish Shacks as well. So we're kind of running 3 brands under our umbrella right now. The Joey stores, we're not really opening. We're trying to get people on the new Fish Shack because it's a new menu and a new look. It's just cleaner. We're getting into smaller spaces, kind of like being more cost effective, right? Like no more are the days of 3,000 square foot restaurants. You probably noticed that, right? Like the Denny's, the Humpties, like those type of brands, they're kind of dying a bit because rent's getting too expensive. Stuff is just getting too expensive. So let's build smaller stores and try to do the same volumes. And so we got the Fish Shack, we got the Streets. My goal ultimately, I mean, I think Streets, I want to be in the States. I want to have 500 stores in 20 years. My goal is 100 stores in the next 10, and then another 400 after that. And Joey's Fish Shack, if we can continue opening up some of these and have success at that, then I'll be, by all means, like, I'm excited for that. But I get a little bit more excited about the street stuff because I have a little more control over it, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair, man. The restaurant industry is super hectic. I mean, as is football. So I think that you're really familiar with how the environment goes. But as they say, high risk, high reward, tons of craziness and having to deal with all these hectic variables. But then the payoff and what you get at the end of it, I'm sure is more rewarding than anything that you could probably imagine at this point for what you could be doing with your life currently in terms of work.
100%. I mean, there's so many uncertainties, especially with supply chain issues and everything that COVID's brought as a result. Yeah, it's frustrating. It's stressful most days, but you know, when you see franchise partners having success and, you know, the success of the brand trending upwards, it makes it worth getting up every day.
So Michael, we're getting towards the end of our time on today's episode. So I want to ask you some fun wrap-up questions before we part for today.
Hell yeah.
What is your favorite football movie?
Ooh, what is my favorite football movie? I'd have to say like either Any Given Sunday or Remember the Titans or The Longest Yard. Maybe The Longest Yard, actually, because that one's just a little easier to watch and, you know, you don't have to pay as close attention.
If you could have been a professional athlete in any other sport, what would have been and why?
I think baseball, because I would have had a shot at playing baseball. It's not out of this realm. I was a very good baseball player up until I kind of really got involved with school sports. And I think if I would have continued with that, I'm not saying I would have been an MLB superstar, but I think I would have, you know, maybe paid my way through school and had an opportunity, you know. And it's way easier on the body, and you can probably play a bit longer, and the money's better.
Literally, yeah. I mean, there still are some parts of baseball that I've realized over the years that can make it still stressful and physically demanding, but definitely nothing like playing defensive line in pro football.
For sure.
Favorite childhood sports hero?
Oh, dude, if I told you that I never watched sports or still don't watch sports, you'd probably hate me, but that is the truth. I don't know. Who did I grow up watching? I honestly didn't watch sports, man, when I was a kid. Most people don't know that about me. I do not watch sports now. I did not watch sports while I played sports, except for all the film that we had to watch. So I did enjoy watching JJ Watt when I was a university kid because I always emulated him. We had the same kind of body type, you know, strength and speed wise, like we were very similar. He was obviously a better football player than me, but you know, I emulated him later as I started to learn more about football and sports. But yeah, growing up, man, we didn't watch sports in my house. It's weird. I'm weird.
Wow. I mean, I know the first person I think I met who played high level football and said, I don't like watching football, it's just not my thing, was somebody from the University of Calgary and said, no, I play football, but I don't watch the sport. I don't watch sports. I just want to play golf when I retire and go easy on the body and go easy on my knees. Mind you, he was an offensive lineman, so probably know all about Curtis Cron.
Oh yeah. I believe that too, man.
Yeah. One of my great buddies and definitely a great man. And also he was a great football player, and he's taught me a lot of lessons about football from the perspective of an O-lineman. And especially when you have to deal with defensive linemen like yourself, it's definitely something to be very vigilant of. Your knee health is so underrated. Do not take it for granted.
Exactly.
So then I must ask, what was your favorite hobby or fun activity to do in childhood then? If you didn't watch sports, what did you absolutely love to do the most?
I loved getting outdoors. I was an avid like dirt biker. So I always had like a dirt bike growing up. I entered a race when I was like 18, just like an amateur race, and actually won. And that was my first and only motocross race. But, came from a big farm family, so always had access to the outdoors and farms and that type of stuff. So spending time out there. As a young child, it would have been Lego. I was a big Lego guy. I always had all my creations on a shelf behind my bed. Yeah, man, camping. I had a snake as a reptile guy when I was growing up, but I'd have to say like just being outdoors, camping, dirt biking.
And the final question is, whether it be as a kid or into your teenage years or now as an adult, who are two people that you've looked up to the most in your life?
Probably my parents. They worked and scraped and did everything themselves. Like my parents didn't have a pot to piss in when they decided to open a restaurant and take that risk. And when you listen to their story about how they really weren't having success at first and ready to hang it up, but went in for one more month, and we're talking, they're up at 6 a.m. They're not getting bed till midnight every night, just the two of them running this restaurant. And then, one good review kind of made it into the Calgary Herald about 7 months after opening. And then from there, it's just kind of, all their hard work paid off. And, and even then it was a struggle from then, because it was like, okay, then they opened a second store, a third store, a fourth store, and then they wanted a franchise. And, even in my childhood, I remember living in a basement suite and my parents not having all that you would think that they would have owning a successful franchise, right? And even since then, as a kid and through a teenager and now a young adult, watching them grow and expand into so many other aspects of business, it gets me excited about all the opportunities that like I can make for myself. And that was one of the first things that I did when I started playing football was, most rookies saved up for that nice car to drive in the off season or whatever. But I came home for my second off season and put a down payment on a rental property. And now, 8-9 years later, it's like you start seeing like why these things pay off and why you should take those a little bit of financial risk to look out for your future. And then, then I was able to get into another one and now another one. And, I'm not saying that I made a crap ton of money playing football. It's just, I think I made a little smarter decisions and always drove the piece of shit around so I could buy the assets, not the liabilities. Right. So.
Yeah. A very wise guest that has been on the show before talking about real estate and football, Bob Cameron. Quick little story. Phoned him up one time after we had our episode and I was like, Bob, thanks for being on. It was so great. You're someone that whose game I modeled myself after, really enjoyed talking about your experience. I'm like, so what do you do now? He's like, well, back in 1980, when I had my first rookie contract, my wife and I bought a small little house on the river in Winnipeg. And guys used to make fun of me for it and say, why would you buy a piece of crap, man? Like, what are you doing? And years later, he built himself slowly but surely a nice little chunk of real estate across the entire city and made sure to invest in assets, not liabilities, like you just said. And he didn't have to make tons and tons of money playing in the CFL, especially back in the 80s. Like, if you can imagine what it's like now, like back then it was even less comparatively. So the point being, even if, you play in a position where everyone's a meathead or the dumb jock or whatever, but you're in the position to make smart decisions because you're inspired by incredible people like your parents, and then it pays off. You don't have to be a multi-generational millionaire NFL player to be able to enjoy your life and to build something bigger than you could have imagined, especially with how you grew up.
Exactly. Just, everyone's got to build their empire, and it depends on when they start, and the earlier the better, right? So, having that wealth of knowledge from a young age and watching how my parents, raised us and grew up, it was an easy decision to make. And I was very fortunate that they were my role models, right? Because you could easily have the opposite and you could be keeping up with the Joneses, right? So
that is super true. And I resonate with that a crazy amount, because that's definitely one of the biggest things that plagues people as they get older into their adult life, is keeping up appearances, or like you said, keeping up with the Joneses. It's just, it's toxic. It's just something that you can't get yourself into that hamster wheel. You got to do what you got to do for yourself. And that's what's going to bring you the most fulfillment, is worrying about what you can do and what is best for yourself.
Yep, for sure.
Well, with that, Michael, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. I want you to let the listener know, where can they get the amazing food that Streats has to offer?
Well, check us out, www.streats, spelled STREATS, kind of play on words there, .ca. And you'll be able to see or find a location nearest you. If you want to have an opportunity, maybe run into me, come check out 11th Ave and 5th Street, downtown Calgary. I'm there quite a bit, not all the time, but slide me a message and maybe I'll meet you down there for the world's best fish taco.
Thank you for having been on today's episode, and make sure that you go check out streats.ca. Make sure you go check them out in Calgary. Look at their locations that are nearest to you. It's absolutely outstanding food. I love it. You'll love it. You're definitely going to want to go check it out and be fulfilled with the story that was to help create such an amazing restaurant. So with that, Michael, thank you for having been on today's episode. It was a great pleasure to talk about football and food with you, man.
Heck yeah, man. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for listening to today's episode with the owner of Streats Kitchen in Calgary, Alberta, as well as CFL alumnus, Michael Klassen.